Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today, we're looking at the top 10 hilariously dumb things said by US presidential candidates. It's only a year now until the 2016 US election, and that can mean only one thing: gaffes galore. Over the past few months, the hopeful candidates have been travelling the length and breadth of the country and sticking their feet in it at every possible opportunity. Here are some of the most painfully dumb things next year's wannabe presidents have recently said from both sides of the political divide. Number 10. Trump. US GDP is below zero. Honestly, we could have filled this entire video with nothing but Trump quotes and still had enough left over for a sequel. The silly-haired billionaire has turned controversial gaffes into an art form, but sometimes even the Donald comes out with something that's nothing if not plain dumb. Case in point, the time he claims that the US GDP has fallen below zero for the first time in history. Since GDP is a measure of all economic activity within a country during a given time period, the US would have to become a barren wasteland devoid of human life for this to be true. Even the post-apocalyptic future of Mad Max has economic activity, for crying out loud. What Trump meant to say is that the US GDP has experienced negative growth for the first time in history, but even this statement is hilariously wrong. Negative growth for 2 consecutive quarters is the hallmark of a recession. Aside from the Great Recession, the US has experienced 10 smaller ones since World War II alone. Before that, we had the Great Depression. Trump himself has lived through most of them, frequently while running businesses. Number 9. Carson. Prison turns you gay. Ben Carson is like the unimaginative Hollywood sequel to Trump's insanity, more of the same, only crazier. Aside from making dubious comments about the Holocaust and blaming the Oregon shooting victims for their tragic fate, he's made some wildly unscientific claims. In March 2015, he said,
"A lot of people who go into prison straight, and when they come out, they're gay." So, did something happen while they were in there?
Being a former neurosurgeon, you might expect Carson to know a thing or two about how science works, but you would be wrong. According to Helen Eigenberg, an expert on prison sexuality at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, Carson's statement is, quote, insane. Sure, there is a massive problem with male rape in America's prisons, but that's not because prison hormones or whatever are making straight men gay. It's because some prisoners use rape as a way of dominating other inmates and getting power over them. That doesn't make them gay. According to the 150,000-strong American Psychological Association, homosexuality isn't something that can be brought on by a change in circumstances, no matter what Ben Carson thinks. Number 8. Clinton. The Benghazi probe is the longest in congressional history. It's not just GOP outliers who have been talking nonsense recently. The presumptive Democratic nominee, Hillary Clinton, has been showing her tenuous grasp on history. In September 2015, her official campaign Twitter account tweeted about the Benghazi probe, saying, "It's the longest-running congressional investigation ever. It's cost taxpayers $4 million, and what's it about?" Although 17 months is a pretty long time, a quick Googling would have proven it's not the longest ever. In fact, it's not even close. The World War II Senate Special Committee to investigate the National Defense Program lasted a full 90 months. During the Civil War, the Joint Committee on the Conduct of War lasted a less showy but still impressive 40 months. But hey, America was at war then. You can't really compare, right? Well, maybe not, but that still leaves the 1957 to 1960 Senate Select Committee on Improper Activities in Labor Management Relations, 38 months, and the 1976 to 1979 House Select Committee on Assassinations, which was 30 months. Expand to include investigations by permanent committees rather than special panels, and at least 3 more lasted longer than Benghazi, including 2 in the last 10 years. Sorry, Hills, but you've got a long way to go yet. Number 7. O'Malley. Assad messed up invading Syria. The Democratic candidate and former governor of Maryland, Martin O'Malley, might be under most people's radar, but he can still drop clangers like a pro. During the televised debates in mid-October, the conversation turned to Syria. O'Malley's take:
I think Assad's invasion of Syria will be seen as a blunder.
As gaffes go, this one takes some beating. Assad, for all his faults, is the president of Syria. He could no more invade the country than Obama could invade Delaware. The likelihood is that O'Malley meant to say Putin. As president of the neighboring Russia, Putin can indeed invade Syria, although since he's there at Assad's request, that might still be a poor choice of words. Nonetheless, it didn't give us great confidence in O'Malley's ability to negotiate the fraught world of international politics. Number 6. Bush. The federal government doesn't deport criminals. Compared to the lunacy of Trump or Carson, Jeb Bush is like the voice of sanity in a crowded GOP field. However, even this seasoned pro still finds some time to get his figures hilariously wrong. In August, Bush declared,
"The federal government right now does not deport criminals."
It is true that the government routinely opts not to deport violent criminals, but to claim it doesn't deport any criminals, period, is akin to punching the concept of research in the face. In the fiscal year 2014, Immigration and Customs Enforcement removed and deported over 300,000 illegal immigrants. Discount those removed at the border and those deported for breaking immigration law, and you're still left with nearly 87,000 criminals deported by the government in a single year. That doesn't sound like does not deport to us. Number 5. Sanders. The US spends twice as much on healthcare as any other nation. The predicted runner-up in the Democratic race, Bernie Sanders is famous for speaking his mind. Sometimes that means parting company with the truth and sailing off over the horizon of insanity. In 2015 and previously in 2009, the Bern declared,
"Meanwhile, we end up spending almost twice as much per capita on healthcare as do the people of any other country."
The US definitely does spend more than any other OECD nation, but the only way it could spend twice as much is if you secretly blew up half of Europe. In 2013, the US was spending $8,713 per capita, compared to $6,325 for Norway and $5,862 for Switzerland. Places like Germany, France, Belgium, Austria, and Denmark all spent over half what the US spends, as did Sweden and the Netherlands. Sanders probably meant to say that the US spends twice as much per capita as the OECD average, which is currently true. But since we didn't give O'Malley or Trump any leeway for this misspeaking, we won't be giving any to the Bern either. Number 4. Huckabee. The DC area has never had a recession. A long-time fixture on the GOP's craziest wing, Mike Huckabee has dropped his fair share of clangers. Usually this just amounts to insulting a particular group, but occasionally the former governor of Arkansas also slips up on history. Only in September he claimed that the DC metropolitan area has never had a recession. If Huckabee had said never suffers as badly as the rest of the country during a recession, he'd have a point. DC area downturns tend to be shorter and shallower thanks to the presence of the federal government. But by claiming the capital has never experienced economic difficulties, his statement tilted over the edge of sanity and plunged screaming into cloud cuckoo land. In the last decade, the DC area has experienced consecutive quarters of negative growth, the standard definition of recession. Unsurprisingly, this came in the 2007 to 2009 period when everyone was in trouble, but Washington, D.C. was also hit during the early 1990s and early 1980s. Oddly, it also suffered flat growth, though not recession, during 2012 to 2013 when the larger economy was leaping back on its feet. Not quite the unstoppable economic superpower Huckabee makes it out to be. Number 3. Clinton. All my grandparents were immigrants. It's not just congressional history where Hillary falls down, it's her own family's history too. Back in April, Hillary moved to catch the pro-immigrant vote by relating her own personal experiences. In Iowa, she declared, "All my grandparents, came over here." She was 75% wrong. Let's start with the bit she got right. Her paternal grandfather, Hugh Rodham Sr., was definitely an immigrant. He was born in England and made his way over to the States. Now let's move on to the bits she got extremely wrong. Regarding her remaining grandparents, 2 were born in Illinois and 1 was born in Pennsylvania. In other words, they were as American as apple pie. To be fair, most of Hillary's great-grandparents were immigrants. 7 of the 8 were born abroad, but that's some lackadaisical record-keeping. Number 2. Carson. America's enemies were all BFFs in their youth. Here's a brain tickler for you. What do Iran's supreme Ayatollah, Ali Khamenei, Palestine's Mahmoud Abbas, and Russia's Vladimir Putin all have in common? Answer: according to Ben Carson, they all hung out together in 1968 Moscow. The full quote, so you can appreciate its wacko scope, runs,
1968 at Patrice Lumumba University. That's when Putin first got to know the Ali Khamenei and also Mahmoud Abbas.
In other words, Carson is implying that 3 of America's great villains got together in 1968 to found the real-life equivalent of Spectre. Hilariously, this doesn't even pass the basic logic test. Putin was 16 at the time, studying in high school, lived 10 hours away from Moscow, and had nothing about him to indicate that he'd ever hold a position of power. Khamenei had been imprisoned in March 1967 and was rotting in an Iranian cell. Only Abbas may have possibly visited the university, but it's very unlikely he did so in 1968. 1982 is a far more likely date, as that's when he's known to have visited Moscow. When challenged on this, Carson claimed the CIA had told him. The CIA, for their part, declined to comment. Number 1. Trump. All Iowans are brain damaged. Finally, we end on a quote from the world's greatest professional troll. After a poll was released in October showing Ben Carson leading over Trump for the first time in Iowa, the Donald's official campaign account tweeted, "Too much Monsanto in the corn creates issues in the brain." In other words, Trump had just outrageously, kind of hilariously, insulted every single resident in one of the states that he needs to carry. The resulting blowback was so fierce, Trump issued his first apology in perhaps living memory, blaming the tweet on a campaign intern. Whether or not that's the case, it still displays stupidity to an award-winning degree. Then again, maybe it's all part of his master plan to get elected by abusing voters so much they develop Stockholm Syndrome. With someone as openly crazy as Trump, who the hell knows? So I really hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, do click like below and subscribe for brand new content just like this 7 days a week. Also, over there on the right, I'm linking over to a couple of other videos you'll probably enjoy if you enjoyed this one, and thank you for watching.